It is March 4th, and that's what we're doing. We're going to March 4th
towards spring.
Towards spring.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I guess spring's what? Less than 3 weeks away.
That's
now.
right.
So
That's
excited.
exactly right.
Oh, also want to remind you that this Sunday is when, sorry, you're over here, aren't you? This Sunday, we move our clocks ahead.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
We're springing forward.
Springing forward this Sunday. Oh, boy, I'm so excited. I love it.
I do too. Well, good morning. I'm Kim Best.
Oh, thank
and
you. Oh, and I'm Wayne Alley. I forgot to do that, didn't I? I'm glad you're here, even though I
forgot
who I was there for just a moment.
That's all right. It happens to the best of us.
It does?
Every now and again.
Okay, this is good, I suppose. Anyway, coming up, the Senior Games is beginning this Friday. The annual Senior Games Health Fair.
All right.
Health Fair will be held at the Seeger Senior Center this Friday, beginning at 10:30. And it's a kickoff event for the Senior Games. Registration forms will be available. Free health screenings in areas such as skin cancer screening, hearing, vision, dementia, and depression screening, and more will be offered. You'll be able to drop off your expired medication and talk to a tech from Walgreens about your medication.
Oh, that's nice.
It is very nice, yeah. Also, there will be vendors with information on health-related services for seniors. There's also going to be a free lunch and a raffle. Oh, boy. So
eat and get healthy all at the same time.
Eat and get healthy.
Check on all your medications.
Yeah. So that's this Saturday, beginning at 10:30 at the Senior Center on East Ash Street.
We'll do that on Saturday, and then on Sunday, head on out to Cliffs of the Noose and have that Sunday afternoon free boat ride.
A free boat ride?
A free boat ride.
Free boat ride.
Yes, they're offering next Sunday, March the 15th, from 2 until 4 p.m. at the Cliffs of the Noose State Park. Come out to the boathouse and enjoy an hour in a paddle boat or a canoe on their 11-acre man-made lake. Boats will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. I think that's pretty nice.
That is fantastic.
Even though the prices are pretty minimal anyway, I've gone out there a couple times and taken my family, and we've done the little paddle boat and various things out there, and it's really, really nice.
That is nice.
But this is free of charge. Don't cost you a thing. Next Sunday afternoon, 2 to 4 p.m.
That's fantastic.
I think so, too.
Okay, we have a first aid event today, beginning at 10:30 at the Senior Center again. Carolyn Robertson is an RN. She'll be at the Senior Center to continue her discussion on first aid. This is part 2. A question and answer period will follow the program. The program free and open to the public, which means anybody can go.
That's right.
If you want information, call Erin at 919-705-1785.
Don't forget, we talked about this weekend at the Gray Fox Theater on Ash Street Extension.
Yeah.
They are having the Gray Fox Theater presenting Donna Hughes, and opening for her is fiddle players ages, I believe, 8 and 10 or something like that, 7 and 10.
7 and 10.
Cage and Ben Bullard, which is fascinating. It's a $10 general admission and $12.50 for the first 3 rows. That is 3009 East Ash Street, right here in Goldsboro.
There you go.
And you know what? Donna Hughes has opened for many other folks across the United States. And
Quite well known.
Yes, and she has performed at many places, like at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, Tennessee.
There you go, the Bluebird.
And she lists many places, but that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And that's all taking place at a relatively new Gray Fox Theater.
And you know, that kind of opened up without a whole lot of
fanfare. It did. It certainly did.
But it's a fine place. It is, and they have a lot of talent out there, especially the Bullards coming in, opening up for
Donna Hughes.
For Donna Hughes there, yeah. Okay, all right. Let's see what else we have here.
Well, a lot of people have gone to the Paramount to see Dance for Christ through the years.
Yes, they have.
That is a huge, wonderful production that Patricia O'Quinn Warren and her academy, the Dance Academy, puts on every year, and they've got it scheduled for this year again. It'll take place all weekend, starting on Friday, March the 20th. Show started at 7 o'clock. They'll run all weekend that weekend, and I believe the following weekend as well.
Okay.
$13 are the cost of the tickets. $11 for senior citizens or military discount for matinee shows only, though.
Okay.
That's pretty nice. It says it's a spirit-filled contemporary Christian dance production. Ballet, tap, jazz, lyrical, hip-hop, break dance.
Whoa.
They're all utilized to illustrate stories about Jesus Christ and His presence in our lives. And it goes on and on to talk about various other things, but this is Patricia Warren, and her telephone number, if you want to find out more about this, is 735-7008. danceforchrist.org is the website. find out more about it. But it's a huge production, and she's been doing this for years.
And I don't know why that reminded me of something else entirely, but that is great, and
Yes,
I hope
it
we're
is.
able to go to that. But last week, I was fortunate enough to go to 2 events. One was the Livestock Development Association dinner, annual banquet, and I'll tell you more about that a little later on. And then the following day, I went last week to the United Way annual breakfast. And I'll get into that a little more later on as well, but I wanted to mention that I was so proud that the Emil Rosenthal Award went to our friend Jeff Holtz.
Oh, congratulations.
And Jeff is so deserving of that.
Congratulations.
He is a dear friend and,
Absolutely.
And is one of the hardest working guys I have ever seen. And and I won't say that he'll volunteer all of his time for anything that anybody needs to have done.
Boy, he sure is a fantastic volunteer in our community.
He is an amazing volunteer, and he does a wonderful job for the
Well,
county
congratulations, Jeff Holtz.
and the city. Yes, indeed. So very proud of Jeff.
Fantastic. Let's go to our interviews, and you can tell us a little more about that when we return.
Okay.
So welcome and thank you for sharing part of your morning with me. There is nothing I like better than the opportunity to teach more about our history, not just Black history, but American history, military history, in which so many of our ancestors played a part. So before I begin, I do want to recognize any veterans who might be with us in the room, if you would. Very good. That's right, we have 3 veterans with us today. I graduated from the University of Mount Olive many years ago, and my major was business administration and my minor was history. And although I majored in business for practical purposes, it was my love of history, all history, that kept my attention most of the time. I was preparing a paper many years ago for Professor Claude Moore's class, and I accidentally stumbled across a book in the college library entitled Army Life in a Black Regiment, which is the center book right here. And while I was looking through the book, thinking it was a book about World War II, I suddenly realized this was about the Civil War. And at that time, I had no idea that Blacks even fought in the Civil War. So this was a long time before the movie Glory came out about the 54th Massachusetts. Did anybody see the movie Glory? Well, if you remember that, Black men and young teenage boys served in every capacity, from infantrymen to cavalrymen to heavy and light artillery, surgeons, chaplains, and officers. And I became fascinated with each chapter of that book. And then I found my first picture of a Civil War officer. His name is Sergeant Major Christian Abraham Fleetwood. And from the moment I laid eyes on that picture, he became my hero. And I wanted to know everything about him. My interest continued in the United States Colored Troops, and you'll hear me refer to that as the USCT, sparked by 3 things. My own family members who served in the Civil War, the North Carolina history course that I took under Professor Moore many years ago, and another professor, Ken Dilda, who made a decision to let me do independent study for an entire semester to research Black soldiers. My fascination with the subject continued long after I completed those history courses, and I would visit and write to antique bookstores more to enlarge my own personal library long before there was an internet. And I found more and more information on Blacks in the Civil War than I imagined existed. Most of the books I have here on display are rare out-of-print copies. And I know I've only found the tip of the iceberg in addressing a valiant group of men who were willing to sacrifice for future generations, not only the precious sacrifice of their freedom, but often the most ultimate sacrifice, their lives. So let's begin. As is the cause in most wars, no one knows the exact number of soldiers and sailors who served. Military records estimated to be around 3.7 million. While the rumblings of these 1.7 million, approximately 2,500,000 were white Union soldiers or sailors, and 1,050,000 were white Confederate soldiers or sailors. Roughly 179,000 blacks served as Union soldiers and another 19,000 as sailors. Between 60,000 and 100,000 black soldiers served in the Confederacy. Now, some of you just said to yourself, did she say blacks served in the Confederacy? Hold that thought for just a little bit. It was not an easy task in the 19th century for a black man to join the Army. He literally had to fight for the right to fight. 1857 was not a particularly good year for blacks. Dred Scott had sued the government for his freedom. He lost his lawsuit against his white owner and against the U.S. Supreme Court. The final ruling held that if a black slave could not become a citizen under the U.S. Constitution, and that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. This ruling contributed to the anti-slavery movement and the eventual onset of the Civil War. Following Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, the Republicans were against expanding slavery into new territory, but they weren't willing to take action where slavery already existed. Although free blacks with voting rights supported Lincoln, for the most part, blacks had little faith in any political party. Prominent blacks, particularly Frederick Douglass, began to speak out in frustration. While the rumblings of discontent were heard in the northern black communities and the northern white population was splitting into pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups, the South had a plan of its own: secession. 7 states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas succeeded, and the Confederacy formed in February of 1861. And in April, the war began with the assault on Fort Sumter near Charleston, South Carolina. Blacks were among the first to offer their services to the United States war effort. Many blacks felt a strong obligation and responsibility to fight, as they thought the main thrust of the war was about slavery. Notes from free black men were sent to the Secretary of War just 11 days after Fort Sumter had been fired upon, requesting to serve. Not only were letters sent from individuals, but groups and organizations were willing to serve as well. Blacks wanted desperately to fight their own battle against oppression, as well as prove their worth and loyalty to the United States. Many of them proposed the use of white officers, hoping to make their plea to serve more acceptable to the government. But the U.S. government had no intention of enrolling blacks in the service of the country. Although blacks had served honorably in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, in 1820 the U.S. Army issued an order that no Negro or mulatto would be received as a recruit of the Army. Some blacks began forming drill companies anyway, in hopes of preparation for eventual service. Articles appeared in leading newspapers in the country, and while newspapers denounced the black man's place in the war, the black newspapers were encouraging black men to prepare themselves to fight as soldiers. Blacks were adamant in their desire to serve, but were still met with increasing resistance. In an eloquent editorial in May of 1861, Frederick Douglass said, "Would to God you would let us do something. We lack nothing but your consent. We are ready and would go, counting ourselves happy in being permitted to serve and suffer for the cause of freedom and free institutions, but you won't let us go." Blacks continued to form drill companies across the states in hoping to serve as soldiers. But white businesses feared that if the slaves were freed and more blacks immigrated north, emancipated blacks would flood the labor market and drive down wages. And as tensions built, riots broke out in the North. As 1861 came to a close, the pressure from free blacks, combined with the fact that the South was utilizing every black slave available for servants, laborers, and cooks in the Confederate Army, forced the government to strongly consider admitting blacks to the Union Army. The Navy was already admitting blacks into service by the end of the year. By early 1862, it was becoming clear that the war was not going to end soon, and many Northerners, not just free blacks and abolitionists, were calling for emancipation and enlistment of black troops. Some Army regiments were already using blacks against direct orders. Finally, in July of 1862, Congress passed the Militia Act, which empowered President Lincoln to use black men for any military or naval service for which they might be competent. The United States Colored Troops have been formed, allowing recruitment of men for infantry, cavalry, light artillery, heavy artillery, and duty at sea. The fight for the right to fight had been won. Black soldiers were recruited through the Bureau of Colored Troops in the Office of the Adjutant General. On January 6, 1862, 5 days after Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the first black regiment organized for preparation to enter into the United States Army. The first Louisiana Native Guards were a state militia of free blacks, organized to help defend their home state. The Guards actually organized themselves as a Confederate group, ready to defend Louisiana against the Union or anyone else. These were free men of Louisiana, many of them teachers, farmers, ministers, and owners of small businesses who wanted to protect the land and the assets they'd worked so hard to accumulate. The Confederacy never used them, so they declared their allegiance to the Union when New Orleans fell in April of 1862. Why did they choose to fight for the Confederacy? Soldier Hamilton Robinson, a wealthy free black man in New Orleans, said this to General Benjamin Butler: "No matter where I fight, I only wish to spend what I have and fight as long as I can, if only my boy may stand in the street equal to a white boy when the war is over." No, that's not Hamilton Robinson's son. He was actually my great-grandmother's first cousin, Charles Picou. I came from a long line of free blacks in Louisiana, and two of my grandfather's uncles fought with the Louisiana Native Guards, one of them being Lieutenant Alfred Annis, and I can imagine their father saying exactly what Hamilton Robinson said. The 1st Louisiana was mustered into service in September of 1862. Two more units, the 2nd and 3rd Louisiana Native Guards, were organized in October and November. These first black regiments were known as the Corps d'Afrique, French for the African troops, and in some cases the initial AD, which meaning African descent, was used behind the name of the regiment. Their later designation became the 73rd, 74th, and 75th United States Colored Infantry. And as a side note, the flag that you see here is called a 35-star medallion. Now, there was still commonly used the flag that had the bars and stripes, 7 stars, 5 rows. But this flag, which originated in Baltimore, was designed in Baltimore, was also frequently seen and used throughout the war. So you may see that flag if you're looking at Civil War displays, as well as the 35-star flag. While blacks in Louisiana were brimming with pride over their Native Guards, 4 months prior, in May, General Rufus Saxton, military governor of the South Carolina Sea Islands, assigned Sergeant C.T. Trowbridge to begin recruiting blacks for what was to become one of the most famous black regiments, the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, under the leadership of Colonel Thomas Wentworth Higginson, who was a former captain with the 51st Massachusetts Volunteer Militia. South Carolina had always claimed to have the first USCT infantry because they had organized 4 months prior to Louisiana. They were known as the 1st South Carolina Volunteers until they received their federal designation as the 33rd U.S. Colored Infantry. All Union regiments didn't wear the same uniform. It's hard to see from this original black and white photo of the 1st South Carolina at dress parade, but they were known for their distinctive uniform of blue jackets and red trousers, as you can see from this painting. At the same time, troops were being recruited in Kansas by Senator Jim Lane, even though he had not received official authorization from the War Department to do so. The 1st Kansas Colored Volunteers were mustered in January of 1863, commissioned as the 79th U.S. Colored Infantry, also known as the 1st Kansas Regiment. Their first skirmish was in October of 1862 in the battle at Bates County, Missouri. A news reporter who witnessed the skirmish said, "It is useless to talk any more about Negro courage. The men fought like tigers, each and every one of them." The flag in the drawing is the regiment flag for the 1st Kansas. As each battle was fought and won, the battle location will be embroidered on the flag, and that flag currently hangs in the Kansas State House Capitol building in Topeka. The next unit organized, and perhaps the most famous, was the 1st Northern Unit of Free Blacks mustered into service in the U.S. Army, the 54th Massachusetts. Frederick Douglass's own 2 sons, Lewis and Charles, were among the first to volunteer for service in the 54th. Most of the recruits from South Carolina and Kansas had either been former slaves or runaway slaves. But the local recruits for the 54th were freeborn blacks. Some families had been in Boston for generations. Recruitment for the 54th started in February of 1863, and its 10 companies were full by May. Most of the men had drilled for months in the same clothes and shoes that they arrived in. They were among the last to receive proper uniforms. This photograph was taken by famed Civil War photographer Matthew Brady, who followed the regiment from their formation until they marched into battle at Fort Wagner. And I'd like to think this photograph was taken when those new uniforms finally arrived. Soon after the formation of the 54th came the 55th Massachusetts Infantry and the 5th Cavalry. I have not found a complete regiment picture, but these are a few of the soldiers from the 55th, including one Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. By now, all states were recruiting black troops, and before the war closed, there would be 145 infantry regiments, 7 cavalry regiments, 12 heavy artillery regiments, 1 light artillery regiment, and 1 regiment of engineers. About 60 of those regiments actually saw action on the battlefield, and the others were assigned to post or garrison duty. Over 1,200 white officers were enlisted to command the colored troops. Most of them, but not all, approached this new and different call to duty with a sincere desire to teach, train, and prepare soldiers for battle, and they did so with patience and repetitious practice. There are 4 white officers who stand out in my mind and deserve their own special place in history. Sergeant C.T. Trowbridge recruited over 1,000 soldiers for the 1st South Carolina and taught many of them to read and write. He loved his troops and they loved him. The very first soldier on the roster of the U.S. colored troops in South Carolina was William Bronson of Beaufort. He could not read or write, but when Sergeant Trowbridge recruited him, he was quoted to say, "Put me down as William Bronson, number 1, African Foundation." William Bronson fought a good fight and during a series of skirmishes, saved Trowbridge's life on more than one occasion. This is one of the few photographs taken of black soldiers after the formation of the 1st South Carolina. I like to think that William Bronson is in this picture. Trowbridge returned to South Carolina many times to see his old soldiers.
We're back on Wayne Goldsboro Television. Today is, what's today?
Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday
all day
already?
long. Yep,
Middle
all day
of the
long.
week?
Middle of the week.
Hey, what
Spring
day?
is coming. Tell us one more time the date of our springing forward with our clocks.
We spring forward as you retire for the evening, Saturday night, as you go to bed.
Which Saturday?
This coming.
This coming
This coming
Saturday night.
March 7th. As you go to
Wow.
bed that evening, move your clocks ahead 1 hour.
Yay, I'm looking forward to that. I always look forward to
So
that.
when you awaken, you'll be right on time.
Thank you.
So, well, you know, that's what I'm here for.
Yes.
Some people don't do that, though. They wait until bedtime Monday
Yeah.
or Sunday or something anyway and put it off as long as
and
they can.
they're late on Sunday mornings
Yeah,
if they have
late
any place
for
they're heading.
everything. Yeah, anyway.
And spring is actually what, the 21st of March?
It's-
20th,
it's-
21st?
It's actually, it's the 20th, but it just depends on what time it arrives here
Okay.
in this part of the world.
I knew it was around that date.
Yeah, it's the 21st.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that.
And I did know the time. I can't remember the time that we crossed that line,
Mm-hmm.
that vernal equinox.
Thank you so
You
much.
remember him? He was
Yes.
Elvis Presley's dad. Was vernal.
Yes.
No, actually, it's the vernal equinox, which means that the daylight and the night light will all be the same. Everything is equal, equinox.
I like that day.
Daytime
I like
and nighttime.
spring.
Same amount of time during the day and the night. So there you go. Spring will arrive.
It's my
and
favorite
oh
time of
boy.
year.
And then we're going to look for spring sales.
Oh yes, flowers blooming, the trees
yeah.
getting green again.
That's right. We're gonna
Grass
have-
getting pretty green.
That's right. We're looking for bloomers and we're looking for springs.
Okay.
That's not right. though.
We're not
But
going
we're
there.
close to that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. This
Okay.
weekend,
Yeah.
set those clocks ahead 1 hour.
That's exactly
Springing
right.
forward.
Yes. Oh boy.
Yay, I need to put that on my calendar.
Put that on your
This Saturday night.
You know, there's a pinochle group at the senior center.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, so if you like to play pinochle and you're over 60, they need new members there all the time, and they'll even teach you to play if you want to learn how to play pinochle. If you do, you can call Aaron and find out what you have to do at 705-1785, 705-1785.
Don't forget this weekend at the Paramount Theater, if you want to get out and go see a show, Center Stage Theater is putting on Cheaper by the Dozen. They're going to have shows March 6th and 7th and 8th. So Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon, all at the Paramount Theater, Cheaper by the Dozen. Tickets are, oh my goodness, I can't see it. How about that? Hold on, they're cheap. They're $10 to $12, and they're on sale right now at the Paramount Theater box office. That's this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you got cabin fever and you need to get out and do something, that's a good show to go see.
Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
What else you got going on?
Well, a fellow walks into a doctor's office. He says, "Doctor, doctor, I can't stop singing the green, green grass of home." Doctor says, you know, that sounds like the Tom Jones syndrome. And the patient says, is that common? The doctor says, well, it's not unusual.
Oh.
Now, there's people out there saying, who's Tom Jones?
I know Tom Jones.
Yeah, right, okay.
He's got a great voice.
Oh, I love Tom Jones.
Great voice.
Yeah, he's great. In fact, Elvis liked Tom Jones.
Did he?
Oh, he admired him a lot. Yeah. But, Tom Jones, great entertainer. Okay.
Youth soccer is still having registration going on right now.
Really?
Yes, aren't you excited?
I am.
You can't play, but ages 4 to 12.
Oh, well, that's me.
Okay. Can register
Brain
at Goldsboro Parks and Recreation for youth soccer. $30 per player. That includes their uniform. Remember, ages 4 to 12. Registration is happening right now. Same thing with youth baseball and t-ball. Registration is $20 per player, ages 4 to 12. Contact Russell Stevens at 919-739-7488. That's at Goldsboro Parks and Recreation. All having these registration right now for these spring teams.
Spring teams.
Spring teams.
Spring teams.
That's right.
Teams
all
of
kinds
spring.
of ball.
Yes, indeed. Don't forget the spring fish fry.
Oh, that's right.
Is coming up on April 10th, so you have a little over a month and a few days to get ready for that, and it'll take you that long.
Will it? To get ready for the fish fry?
Get ready for the fish fry. Anyway, lunch starts at 11, goes till 2, and then dinner will begin at 4, go till 7. This is the Wayne Shrine Club Spring Fish Fry on April 10th in 3 locations, and I'll tell you tomorrow where you'll be able to take advantage of that.
Fantastic.
All right, we got to go. Got to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow where we are right now, and I hope you're right where you are right now for tomorrow here on Wayne Goldsboro Television. Until then, I'm Wayne Alley.
And I'm Kim Best, and this is what's happening in your community.